Hello and welcome to another episode of Not Too Deep. I'm your host, Grace Helbig. Very thrilled and excited for you to listen to this episode with comedian, actor, new chicken owner, Matt Walsh. Oh, you might know him from Veep or from decades of improv comedy or from the billion other hilarious comedic films that he is a part of. I loved talking to him about his foray into comedy. We talk about psychology. We talk about digital media obsession. He's got a new movie called Unplugging out, co-starring Eva Longoria, where the couple takes a digital detox. We talk all about that. Also, if you are obsessed with Veep, they have a podcast, he and his co-star, Timothy Simmons, called Second in Command, where they are rewatching episodes of Veep and recognizing the complexity and the whole world of it that they might have not seen while they were making it. So I enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. I had a beautiful time. I might have gotten a little obsessed with the fact that he owns chickens, but that's on me. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Matt Walsh on Not Too Deep. Okay, Matt, I have so many things to ask you about and talk to you about. First thing, on this beautiful rainy day in Los Angeles, I'm curious, what's your first thing you do in the morning when you wake up? Do you have a routine? Do you have rituals? Do you wake up with a certain zest to your day, or is it different every day?
Lately, I've been, I started during the pandemic raising chickens. So my routine in the morning is to get up, maybe make a cup of coffee, and then grab some scraps for the chicken groups, and then go outside with the dog and open up the chicken coop and throw some feed out and make sure they got water and open the gate.
What was the impetus to get chickens? Was it just the pandemic, or had this been something you had been thinking about in the background for a while?
I think the pandemic made me think about it because I don't know. It was like a hobby thing. Like I baked sourdough during the pandemic. Somebody gave me a sourdough starter. So
nice.
I think everyone reverted back to like basics, and also in the weird world where like grocery shelves were empty and you couldn't find things. It was like, I don't know how it popped into my universe, but I thought I have friends who've raised chickens, and we have room. We have like a decent sized yard. So yeah, I just thought about the idea. So I built a chicken coop.
Whoa.
It wasn't great. It was like a shanty.
And a humble coop.
Yeah. And my wife wasn't super excited about it. So then we bought a nicer version of a coop, which is now what they live in.
Is there a learning curve on housing and raising chickens?
Yeah. I think it's keeping it tidy. Rats love chickens. So you got to keep everything tidy and, cleaning up after them, getting some hay. I think keeping them alive. You know, we lost a few over the years.
Dang.
When they're little, our dog went after some of the little chicks, so that wasn't great. So learning how to protect them when they're little. And then just the routine of it all.
Yeah.
They thrive, seemingly like have found a home here, and keep an eye on them. And there's no like predators. Our yard's pretty like walled off, so there's no like coyotes or cats or dogs that roam in. So it's not too hard. It's a fair amount of work.
Yeah.
But in general, and then you get to you clean up the hay, and you can use that for compost on your trees. So it's kind of like a little farm.
Wow.
Biggest little farm.
A real return to nature.
Little bit.
Very cool. I love that you're saying this with like a Peloton behind you.
Well, that was my wife's idea, which I said, sure. And I've only used it 3 times in the last year and a half.
I have never used one. What's the experience like?
It's good. It is a good workout. Like I wish I did it more.
Okay.
But it's good. It's like a 20-minute, 30-minute, 40-minute workout, depending on what you select. I've never done like a live class. It's always like a video.
Right. It seems a bit overwhelming, but probably ultimately very rewarding.
Yeah, it is like any workout. If you just show up, you always feel better at the end of it. But I've only done it 3 times, so my wife is a little more regular.
That's great. Okay, I kind of want to go back to the beginning. I'm so curious about your whole kind of journey into the world of entertainment, creativity, comedy. How did this start for you?
I like your backdrop on the wall, by the way. Is that a
Thank
painting?
you.
What is that?
It's a mural done by these two comedians/artists called Very Gay Paint. And it's a very gay mural. They call it the Gay Eye of Sauron, which I am a huge fan of. I told them that my aesthetic was sophisticated Nickelodeon set, and I think they truly delivered for me.
I do. I like the color and the pattern.
Thanks.
Really nice. Really nice.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So my creative journey, how did it start? Is that really the question?
How did you find, did you find comedy first? Was there something like a seed planted when you were younger? Was there some point in your life that you realized that like this is the outlet for you, that the arts were the world that you needed to be in or belonged in some capacity?
Yeah, I think my interest in comedy was always there. I always was good at remembering jokes and could like recite jokes once I'd heard them, and I liked the structure of them perhaps as a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think as I got older, I realized certainly the power of like making people laugh was attractive to me, like in a big family, seeing my parents laugh at movies, or my dad would always tell stories. And so
because you're one of seven children? That's wild.
Yeah. So I think like comedy was just something that I always liked. I didn't know that there were careers in comedy necessarily, but I did always like it. And then I did a variety show my senior year in high school with some friends where you make fun of the teachers, and we got to write sketches,
nice,
rehearse them. And there was a woman in the theater department who ran the show, and she was very like, "You're actually good at this. You should think about this." And that was like the first time I felt like reinforced, because I was always like class clown and could be counted on for being sort of disruptive, or it was a way for me to get my attention and my identity out.
Sure.
In various settings. And sometimes to my detriment, like I was not a great student in high school because I was doing a lot of attention seeking pranks and mischief, etc. So, but the variety show was really the first formalized like performance, rehearsal, and then writing and creating something and then using it in front of an audience or delivering it in front of an audience and then seeing it succeed was really powerful. And then of course the adoration you get in the hallways after those shows is pretty unique as well. So I think that was the beginning seed. And then in college, I didn't really pursue it for various reasons. I think probably didn't have the courage to go full into it, or didn't know what was on the other side of it. But ultimately, at the end of college, I started taking improv classes. I took one acting class in college, and that was like one of my only, I was like a business major, then a liberal arts, then a psych major. So I wanted to be a psychologist. So right after college, so I wanted to get a job in psychology. So I worked on a psych floor right out of college. And at night I was doing sketch with these guys that I had met in my improv class in Chicago.
Yeah.
And then at some point I realized that I had to just do one of them. And comedy was, the stakes were much lower. Like psychology is pretty heavy duty. So,
but they do feel like I'm also fascinated by psychology. I know I can't ever be a therapist. I think that's too far reaching for me, but I do think that therapists are kind of like superheroes. And I do think those are really complementary avenues to study like the human condition. And that filters and fuels kind of an ability to find comedy in it.
Yeah, I think listening is a big part of a good therapist, and recognizing the patterns of, destructive behavior. I don't know. People always say like, they always assume like, oh, psychology is a great companion for like comedy. I don't know that I consciously draw on it, but I guess any background or any specialization that gives you a foundation of information and approach to something is interesting. I actually did a research paper my senior year, with like rats and things like that.
Whoa.
And then, and then there was another one about perfection. You know the game Perfection, where you have those little cubes that are like a triangle and a circle and a square.
Yeah.
So it's like a time trial. And I took like 50 college students from the psych department, and I tried to see who learned to learn better. And what in my little study, women were better at learning to learn. In other words, their successive trials, they got better. They found organizational systems inside this little trial. Like if I gave everybody if I gave everyone 3 trials, you would see a more increased shaving of time from the female subjects as opposed to the men.
Interesting.
So that was one of the things that I took away from that. But it was interesting.
Yeah. Do you ever, or would you ever consider going back into psychology in any capacity?
I guess I would if it was someone said, we need a therapist and I'll set up all the classes for you and you can...
You just have to show up.
Just start showing up and I'll walk you. I would need an advisor and a mentor and someone to teach me what classes I needed to take. But pursuing it on my own, I just don't have the drive.
Yeah.
But I am fascinated about it. A friend of mine is going through his psych degree and I took some grad school classes in it, but I'm always asking you, what are you studying? I do find it interesting.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that's been in the background, but then comedy and the arts stuck for you. Was that taking improv classes and then just kind of feeling the bug, feeling the sort of addictive quality of it for yourself?
Yeah, I think it is. One is that hit that a crackhead or a heroin addict has where you're in a class and I remember the moment I was doing an improvised scene with someone in a level 2 at a place called Players Workshop. And we were able to sustain a comedic scene for 3 minutes and have the class engaged and laughing. And it was going on stage without any concept of what the scene was about and then sustaining that and then getting, that reinforcement, was amazing.
Yeah.
And so that was something I was chasing for a long time. That improv comedy sketch sort of, it was amazing to me.
Yeah, it is truly, there's a sense of magic powers almost of this control of this godlike creation that I've made something from absolutely nothing. And it is providing a service to people in some capacity.
And it's a magic trick. Without an audience, it probably wouldn't be as amazing.
Yeah,
that's
very true.
Because laughter justifies why you're doing it, hearing the laughter. But it is that. I agree. It is sort of a miraculous, godlike quality you can conjure up with someone who's equally interested and trained and supportive.
Yeah, I mean, so you've founded improv theaters. You've worked in this capacity for so long. Was there a point in which you had to limit the amount of performance and involvement that you were doing in that world?
Well,
was it always kind of consistently this is part of my creative DNA in some capacity?
I think for a long time it was. I think there was sort of a pickup mentality to doing a once a week show or a couple times a month just to get to get some laughs and to stay sharp. And it does keep the creative juices flowing. So I did like being able to drop into a regular comedic show once a week. But as I've sort of gotten out of that habit, really since the pandemic came, I don't know that I miss it. I do miss it, but I don't know that I'll structure my life in a way where I'll have that once a week show again, because there's part of me that knows that you sort of age out of improv. I do think it is a young person's game. Certainly the audiences, there's a generational gap, which I always talk to the audience, even the other performers. There was a time when we were all sort of the same age. And now I feel like I'm always the oldest person on stage, which is great. But
it's a perspective.
It is a perspective, sure. But it's also cultural references. Comedy is steeped in cultural references and concerns of younger people. And so it's okay. And I also enjoy being home with my family on a Sunday night as opposed to getting in the car and going down,
You have chickens that need you now.
My human chickens and then my chickens need me, as well as our 2 dogs. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you think of it as a young person's kind of playground a little bit, because it does. I guess I've never thought about that capacity before, and it does seem very true that it does rely on being kind of tapped into some cultural pulse that I think is much more accessible when you're younger, and that's your only concern is understanding what's happening in the world in real time constantly. And I do think, life starts to create avenues that you actually need to care about, and little things that you need to keep alive outside of the comedy world. I'm curious, when you moved a little bit away from that and we get into this like Veep category now, and you're doing more of a still playful and comedic world, but more structured, was there any how was that experience for you going into a show like that and then it taking off in such a capacity and having such an impact culturally? And I know that you have a podcast now where you're rewatching all of it. So I'm curious if now going back and watching it is something you wanted to do. And second to that, what the experience of looking back on it is for you.
Well, it's funny. The Veep podcast came up during the pandemic because it was like something we could do during the pandemic, but it took so long to like get it in motion. And so that's where that impetus came from. And Tim and I have been friends for a long time. So we enjoy goofing around or doing bits or etc. So it's been fun to do. But being on a show like Veep is a remarkable ride. I've been on many shows that I think are quality comedy, but they don't necessarily get the reception or the exposure or the support or the cultural significance or praise, if you will. And Veep is one of those rare shows that it was an amazing cast, stupendous writing, and also the attention, of the culture was concerned about what we were doing and engaged with it. So that is a rare ride indeed. So that was magnificent. Like you just don't know if you're ever going to land in something like that. And doing the podcast where I go back and rewatch Veep, what I'm learning is that when you're an actor inside a show, you're so myopic about your lines and your scene. Even then, when you watch it, of course, I watched I'm not a fan of watching myself too much. Well, I'm all right, that's enough.
Yeah, that was going to be my other question. I have a very difficult time. There's a difference, I think, between nostalgia, the idea of it, versus actually looking at it and confronting yourself with yourself.
Yeah. Like if you went back and watched some of your episodes of this show, you would probably cringe.
Right. And I don't know exactly. I've been trying to figure out why. And it's so interesting to hear that you have that instinct too. And I'm curious, if you know why that comes up for you.
Well, I think there's vanity. We focus on oh my God, I look old. And there's also as an actor or an artist, you're oh, I could improve that, or that's not the best take.
Yeah.
Or I could have done that better, or that. And then there's also just ego in general, you're looking at the show and hoping you come off well. So there's all these insecurities or human qualities that I think interfere with an objective viewing of anything, which is normal. It's not it's not a flaw. It's just how people are.
Yeah.
So having some years behind it now and going back into Veep, I totally appreciate the show like a fan. I'm not so engaged about oh my God, I look fat, or oh, I could have done that better. Or geez, I wish I would have whatever. There's no regret or kind of defense mechanism being triggered. I just watch it as a fan and I can let go of a lot of that stuff. And so that's been a real joy. And the realization of all the wonderful things that are in that show, it's a true appreciation as a fan. And it's just an interesting sort of experiment, really, to go through something like that and to be able to enjoy it and then talk about it and also discover memories around it from other people that we bring on the show. You're oh my God, I forgot that. Or we did shoot that scene and they never used it. It's just that's the nostalgia part of it. It brings you back to a certain time and place. And it's also a memory sharpener because we're not trusted narrators. Ultimately, we're not built as human beings to retell events that happened years ago because we have the way they're encoded. isn't precise. And also like there's emotional things that need to trigger them, or sometimes we hide them because they are emotional. So ultimately you realize like when you sit across from somebody who's in the same episode and on the same show and you listen to their experience and it's like, oh yeah, that was it. That's kind of how I watch the show. It's like coming at me. It's like Technicolor now. And it's like so beautiful and wonderful. It's like all these things I couldn't realize because I was like an actor memorizing my lines and like trying to get it right and like seeing the story through that character's eyes. But once you can relax and just watch it, it's great. Like it's a wonderful show.
That's very cool. Yeah, that you get the freedom to zoom out and like appreciate all the things that you couldn't see in the moment. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I'm so interested in your new feature, Unplugging, as it relates to all social media stuff. So we'll be right back with more Not Too Deep.
Not Too Deep.
With Grace Helbig.
Hello, listeners. Grace Helbig here, wanting to say two things. A big thank you for listening to the podcast. If you're a regular listener, if this is your first time listening, welcome and thank you. And second thing, if you are enjoying yourself here in this not too deep world we've built and you'd like to leave us a review, that would be so wonderful. If you can go to the iTunes store, the App Store, and leave us a lovely little review, comment. How are you feeling? Good, bad, otherwise? Maybe just good or otherwise would be appreciated. Other than that, enjoy the podcast.
You've really taken to the chickens.
I'm fascinated.
That's your favorite part of my life.
It is, I think, a very interesting detail of your life. I think it's very fascinating because to me, I have no experience with chickens, but they seem, they require a certain level of attention and delicacy and like gentleness and concern that for having kids and a dog to add chickens to it. I'm just like fascinated.
Well, one, it is an experiment that I was able to fold my kids into, and my daughter has continued to sort of help me with them. And two, I think it is like in a world gone crazy where nobody's in control and we're like, I don't know how long this is going to last.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with the world. You feel like, well, at the very least, I can grow eggs and my family will have it. You know what I mean? It gives you some sort of agency.
Totally.
In the way that like we might grow herbs in our garden or like make sourdough. Like there are all these things, or start knitting. Well, at the very least, we'll have clothing,
I think there is a huge sense of independence there that like you can survive in a certain situation that I don't have for myself. So that's why I'm like fascinated by it, that I'm like, I know I could probably run away if I needed to, but I couldn't get eggs for myself readily available.
You didn't pick up a hobby or anything during the pandemic? Nothing?
I tried to knit a little bit. I thought about the bread scenario very often. I got way more into watching reality television as a survival mechanism. So that's, if anyone needs commentary on the Real Housewives, I will live forever if that is my life force.
That's funny.
I'm curious too, with your children, do they have an understanding of what you do? Do they fully understand or appreciate it?
I think sometimes, they do. They've seen a couple things I've done, TV or movies. They don't watch Veep. The older ones could watch Veep now, but I don't think they're very interested in it yet, which is perfectly fine. And I think it's occasionally marked by like people saying, if we're out to dinner, like, oh my God, can I get a picture? Like, so they've seen recognition of my fame or my public life, in addition to their friends watching a movie or TV show and telling them, oh my God, I saw your dad on TV. So I think they appreciate what I do. And they have certainly been to the theater with me to, to see shows. And we do like a month or a holiday show every year, which we're going to try to do again. So they've sort of been part of the theater family.
Do they have interest in the arts? And if they start to cultivate that, is that something that is exciting for you? Concerns you?
I guess it concerns me. Both my wife and I are actors, so we know how hard it can be to be rejected and tie your, when you're an actor and you're getting rejection, it's sort of overly powerful, perhaps, because it's who you are. So it's not like you're doing an accounting thing and you're handing it to someone and they're like, I don't like these numbers, do it again. It's like,
your math is wrong.
I don't like who you are. This whole thing you're bringing,
this
we
thing
don't
that
like it.
You've worked on every second that you're awake every day.
Yeah,
no.
This whole gestalt you're bringing into the room, not a fan. So learning to separate yourself from that is something you can do when you get older, and when you're younger. So that's the concern part of it, is like making sure. But our middle guy is very funny and talented, and they've expressed interest in, voiceover and things like that. So we'll see where it goes. Like, what I would love, if any of your listeners, if they know like a good theater in the Valley that's looking for kids to audition for a play, I'd love to get them into a play first so they can see, because I like the team sport aspect of theater where you have to, people rely on you. And like, I don't want it to necessarily go right to like getting an agent and a manager and getting a voiceover on a cartoon. I want the whole experience.
Yeah.
And seeing all the pieces of it.
And there's, it fosters community too, that you really feel like you're part of the system that has to work together.
Yeah.
Very
exactly
cool.
Right. Exactly right.
Speaking of systems, let's talk about Unplugging. This film is basically you and your wife go away to do a digital detox.
Correct.
How did this project come up? How did this happen?
A buddy of mine, Brad Morris, and I just wrote the concept of like, it started with like the concept of like a soft apocalypse. It's almost like everything doesn't go to shit, but like you can't get Wi-Fi and your phone is spotty. And so from that, we just wrote a story about a couple who, because we all are addicted to screens, whether we admit it or not.
Oh, hugely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a marriage or a relationship where there's some issues that they're not dealing with. And it's a symptom. The fact that they're both sort of so addicted, even their daughter, to screens is a symptom of like, we need to like unplug and investigate who we are when we're not around these things. So they go to a remote location where there's no Wi-Fi, no signal. And because they're so addicted, they don't know what to do with themselves at first. And then at some point, they get freaked out that the whole world's ending and that the Chinese have hacked the electrical grid. And so they go off into the woods. So, but on that journey in general, they are able to unpack a couple of things that they weren't dealing with in their marriage. Like a couple, I guess they're secrets in a classic theatrical sense. Like, this really bugged me and this was terrible. And I don't know where you are. And, those kind of moments.
It's very interesting to me because it feels obviously hyper relevant right now. I think especially in the pandemic of it all, our only reliance has been on this form of communication, this form of connection, this form of it's distraction, whatever it might be. I'm curious, like, what your personal relationship is with like social media and, internet, all that kind of jazz.
I'm a bit of a dinosaur, quite honestly. Like, I really am. Like, social media is all outgoing.
Yeah.
Mostly, like, I promote things that I like or friends things. I'll promote those things. Social causes, I'll throw things out into the universe. Projects I'm involved that are raising money for a cause. So it's all outward going. But I don't scroll to see what people are up to every day. I don't at all. And I oftentimes have my assistant like, can you post this for me? Because I don't know how to do a story. I don't know how to do an Instagram story. Like, I don't know how to do half of it. And then the other side of it is our kids, like, TikTok and trying to police that. And it's all fine. Like, it's not inherently evil, but it is time wasting in a way that, like, for a young mind that's developing, we're constantly like trying to set boundaries and keep them off of like social media where like, adult things happen. It's like, just go slower, just preserve a little innocence. You don't need to be exposed to the whole world when you're 12 or 14 or feel the pressure to have followers at that age. So I think we're doing an okay job, but ultimately, like, I'm sure our kids spend way too much time on screens.
I mean, it's so difficult. Like the majority of my adolescence was without the internet, and the internet was created in that like moment. And so how do we even compare being born into a world where the internet is immediately available versus not. Like there's no blueprint on. I'm fascinated by the psychology of like kids raised with internet as adults, what's going to happen with the byproduct of all of that. Because it is, it's a difficult thing to process. Like you said, having the entire world in your hand available to you at any moment of the day.
Yeah,
Wild.
It's exactly right. And your general concern is just to preserve a little innocence or just to go a little slower. And I didn't get a phone till I was like 31, I think. Like the cell phone entered my life at the age of 31. So that's the generation I am, you know? And these kids, by the same token, I took great pride in their ability to like navigate technology because it's not going away. Like my son at the age of 5 was like playing some game where he could like Tom Cruise and Minority Report, like stroke, key, play, turn, click, like his dexterity. I'm like, oh, he'll survive in the future world. You know, like part of me does take pride that they are understanding technology and they know how to use it. But a lot of those things, they develop quickly. Like you don't need to spend 100 hours to get that. You can spend 5 hours and get that. You know what I mean? Like after a while, it's just repetitive, like TikTok funny, like TikTok, like after a while, you're not really building a skill set. So
yeah. Well, is that kind of the takeaway that you want audiences to have with Unplugging? Like, is there kind of that sort of messaging of like the over-reliance on it?
Way to keep me on task. Thank you, Grace. Way to keep me focused.
Only job.
This is Unplugging. No, this is about unplugging the movie.
Creating
with
a
Eva
framework.
Longoria. Yes. It's a wonderful comedy. Ultimately, it's a comedy.
Right.
It's truly a comedy about like how addicted we are to screens, how they can be an impediment to a marriage, how like nature always wins. Like if you get into nature, it just resets you. It's like biorhythms and everything just clicks in. So it's about that. And it's about like, I don't think it's like a Brave New World, like we're scaring people in any way. I think it's just like a relatable story of like these people go away for a weekend with no cell phone, no Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And they get so paranoid, they think like the Chinese have taken over the West Coast. Like, what does that say about our lifestyle?
Yeah.
Ultimately, you know, but it's also like engaging a little bit with, you know, nature and putting things away, like creating boundaries, like, you know, that's sort of what we learn. But it's straight up just a comedy. It's like hopefully funny the whole way through. I play a ridiculous guy who thinks he's crushing it by making hot sauce in his garage. So he's got Dan's devil sauce and he thinks he's an entrepreneur, but really he came out of an advertising job that didn't pan out. He was supposed to keep climbing and he's basically kind of licking his wounds a little too long. Okay. So then in the meantime, his wife, played by Eva, jumps into this other career and she's like crushing it, but she's kind of like gone a whole other direction. And so now he's sort of stay at home. So it's been this reversal, which they haven't really established, but also like he needs to get his shit together and then she needs to maybe tone it down a little bit. You know what I mean? So they need to meet in a way. And so that's kind of what's underneath it all is that. And I think going into the rural part of the story, which we filmed it during COVID, which was a miracle. Like nothing bad happened. Nobody got COVID, but it was like a simple story where they go to the remote wilderness and going to these remote places, as you know, people who don't engage with all different likes of people can preserve a point of view on the world. So it's also about that. Yeah. Like you tend to get more conspiracy theorists or more like odd prejudices, let's say, when you get to remote regions, simply because they're not bumping into a variety of life in a simple way. So we sort of get into that a little bit too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I feel like it's hyper relevant right now because everyone does, I think, have that fear or curiosity in the back of their brain that if I woke up and my Wi-Fi didn't work tomorrow, could I get in my car and know where to drive without a GPS signal? Like all of these like small things that make you feel a little bit weak or inferior or like completely incapable as like a human being in the world.
Well, one of our producers, Debbie Liebling, who's an awesome producer, she won't look at her screen time usage on her phone because she's like constantly multitasking. Yeah. She is afraid of looking at it. She will never look at it. Have you done that?
I have thought about it. I have not engaged with it because I don't want to be that confronted with my truth. But I have friends that will put limitations on their phone, like I guess there's things in your phone where you can literally say my phone will shut off this app after 2 hours of use, but they reach that period by like noon and realize that they have to restructure their actual limitations because it's not actually working for them. And it's a bit devastating to kind of be confronted with that. I'm also curious because I'm
going right now. Go to your phone. Come on.
I say I don't want to because
I don't know you that well, but
it's going to be awful. I play Scrabble Go literally all day long.
I play a little bit with my mom. I'm 4 hours, 7. Oh, you do? Isn't that a neat thing to stay in touch with your mom?
I play over the pandemic. We started getting into playing Scrabble Go with each other, and I think it's very sweet and cute. I sometimes have to let her win, but otherwise, it's very, very fun. Highly recommend it, but that's going to fuck up all of my screen time. That's going to throw everything off.
Come on, look at it. I just looked at mine. I haven't looked at mine in months.
What's your average?
4 hours, 7 minutes on average, I think is what it says.
5 hours, 38 minutes. Which honestly isn't as bad as I thought it would be. Gorgeous.
That's not crazy.
It's not crazy.
I'm glad that's crazy.
I ripped the Band-Aid and I'll work on that.
Thank you for going there with me.
Thank you for getting me to be vulnerable. I work on this in therapy and it's nice to practice it in the real world.
Not too deep with Grace Helbig.
Okay. I'm actually going to skip ahead to the 2 questions. This is what we'll wrap up with that I ask every single guest that is on the podcast. The first question I ask is, who, alive or dead, would you most like to throw cold spaghetti at?
What?
And this is something that is truly individualized of your intention. You can have a person in mind that is your answer for right now, but this is an answer that can constantly evolve and change over time.
I feel like I want to go between it goes between like Galileo or like Astropithecus, like a caveman who wouldn't understand our food. Okay. Like to throw a meal like that at a caveman and have them like eat it and understand that it's delicious. And also with Galileo, I feel like he would probably give me some scientific explanation of how it traveled and hit him.
Either way, I would like to watch the learning curve of both of those moments. Mm-hmm. Okay, the other question I ask every single guest is to tell us your worst pants shitting story or like a bathroom emergency situation. However, you can only use 3 words or like small phrases to describe the event. And for example, mine is college, jogging, front lawn.
I mean...
I thought you were frozen for a second. I was like, oh no, not again.
Forewarned diarrhea, 2nd grade. That's 4 words, but
I mean, it's a beautiful poem. That's what you just made.
Forewarned diarrhea, 2nd grade.
Yeah, it also sounds like a weird Dido song or something. Matt, I appreciate so much this conversation and thank you for being so patient with the technical difficulties. Before we let you go, we like to give a token of our appreciation to each guest by giving them a personalized horoscope that we have written for you, that Melissa just put in the chat if you'd like to read it aloud.
Who created it?
Our writer that works on the show.
Okay. So is it, before I read it, is it just because of the day and time or whatever I was born, or is it related to my profession and my history as a performer, or you know what I mean?
It's a bit of a combination. We understand that you're a Libra based on your birth date. So it's a bit of that as an inspiration, but then facilitated into a more personalized statement based on your life experience.
Thank you for that.
You got it.
Dear Libra, scales of the stars. Expect Venus to form a conjunction with Pluto in Capricorn this weekend. I still don't know what it means, good or bad. This is the time to come up with new family traditions for the holidays. I like that. And by new, we do not mean forcing your whole family to watch the Chicago Bear highlights on ESPN Classic. Penny doesn't care. Oh my God. How do you know I have a dog named Penny?
I mean, it's in the stars, apparently.
Oh my God.
They're the universe.
Penny was on camera for a moment. She's the best.
She's bouncing around back there.
Yeah,
she's got lots of energy.
Yes.
Well, I hope that your holiday traditions.
I love a new family tradition. We still haven't gotten our tree, so there's plenty of time to start traditions.
Plenty of time. Matt, where can people listen to the podcast Second in Command, and where can they see Unplugging potentially?
Unplugging will be coming out in the spring of next year in 8-10 cities, and also on digital platforms. And then the Second in Command podcast is on. If you go to castmedia.com, you can find it there, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Second in Command, I'm sure you can find it.
Amazing. Well, thank you again so much. This was such a lovely conversation.
Yeah, it was very delightful as well on my side.
Oh, great. And guys, go check out everything that he's up to. And if you see anything that he posts online, know it's either from him or directed from his assistant.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
And we'll see you guys next time on another episode of Not Too Deep. Goodbye.
Too deep, too deep, too deep. Not too deep with Grace Helbig.
Not Too Deep is a production of Grace Helbig Incorporated. Producer Melissa D. Montz. Edited by Shireen Lani Yunus. Post-production sound by Chris Henry. And an extra special thanks to Flula for the theme music.